design can be a little funny at times. It could have different interpretations depending on the scenario. When you hear the phrase, "That's a great design," would you know exactly what your interlocutor meant by that? It could mean aesthetics, functions, or even both. To give a much deeper meaning to the word design, let's put it this way. Design is about giving meaning to something. It is all about creating an everlasting experience. Design is something more than aesthetics, and most certainly it has many notches above the planning function. That is exactly why the concept of design transcends a single discipline. It can be applied to web, mobile, software, fashion, industrial, interior, and everything else. In the world where anything could be built, it is a matter of understanding whether it really should be built. That is design. Design is something that elevates the lives and lifestyle of people. Design changes what is into what ought to be. Design is the way to build a better and beautiful world. However, what we need to keep in mind is the fact that everything is designed, but few things are designed well. Design is so simple, and that's what makes it so complicated.
Design is very subjective and it depends on the person, but to me, good design is simple and practical for its use. Design and ceramics, when we decide on a product, we first figure out what is the final use, and then we make sure that all our designs are based on it being practical for that final use. Ceramics is considered an inorganic, non-metallic material. Ceramics encompasses a lot of product. For example, porcelain, bone china, terracotta, tiles are considered ceramic, but also glass and cement also falls into the ceramics spectrum. Mideya started in 1968 by my father, and this year we celebrate our 50th anniversary. We are mainly an export company that export ceramics for the European, Japanese and American market, but we also are slowly getting into the local market and expanding our brand. Mideya makes handmade, niche, high-end ceramics for the export and local market. We use 85% local raw materials, and we add about 80% value to these raw materials before we export. The 6 main raw materials we use is kaolin, feldspar, ball clay, silica, sand, quartz and dolomite. If you look around this room, everything has been made by using a ratio of these 6 materials. This is our incoming raw material storage and crushing plant. All raw materials we bring in have to undergo almost 13 to 14 different tests before we accept it into production. If we don't do these tests, we cannot guarantee the quality of the final product. This is our clay preparation department. We bring the small ground stones and we load it into these ball mills, and then we crush it until they are very finely ground, and then we add the kaolin and the ball clay into the high-speed blunger or the high-speed mixer, and once that is mixed we send it through a vibrating sieve and then through magnetic separators, and then we send it through the filter press, and we make the final product of this department, the filter press cakes. This is our main raw material, which we call the body, and we make about 4 or 5 different types of bodies in our factory. Our high-speed blunger. The raw materials that are finely ground in the ball mills are mixed with the already finely ground kaolin and ball clay, and once it's mixed we send it up through vibrating sieves and then through magnetic separators over there, and we store it in the mixing tanks for at least a week for aging. Once the clay has aged, we send it through these filter presses, which make the filter press cakes. This table shows the 6 pieces of molds that come together to make the final elephant. These are the sample molds in white, and the case molds or the mother molds that have been made in pink color different type of plaster to the sample molds. When we make a sample mold and the sample mold is approved, in this case the body of the elephant, when the sample mold is approved, we then make a mother mold. And when we pour plaster into this mother mold, we get the production mold of the elephant. Like that, all the pieces, which constitute 21 different pieces of molds, comes together to make the final elephant mold. This is the casting department where finally the produced molds and the clay come together. We fill the 6 pieces of molds with clay, and then we pour it out, and then we cast the pieces of the elephant out of the mold, and then they are sent to the next step, which is finishing. Once the item is cast, it goes to the next department, which is the finishing department. This is where all the necessary bits are added and the unnecessary bits are cut off, and also any attachments are glued together using the same clay, and the final finish is done on the product before the first firing. The biscuit firing happens at 1000 degrees and it takes about 22 hours from cold to cold firing. Once it's biscuit fired, the reason it's called biscuit is because it's still a little bit brittle. It can be broken like a biscuit, but it's hard enough to be handled for hand painting and glazing so that it can move on to the next department. The polishing section is where we polish and check the biscuits to see that they are in good condition, good enough to be painted. Any small issues, any small cracks or any uneven edges are smoothed out using sandpaper, and then the item is prepared for painting. painting section, here we paint with underglaze paints the design on the item. Once the paint is done, the next department will be glazing, and once the glazing is complete and the item is fired for the second time, the glaze will become transparent and the paint will show through the glaze. This is the glazing department where the hand-painted item is glazed by hand, and the glaze surface has to be smooth, and once it's glazed and fired, it will turn transparent and the hand painting underneath the glaze will show through. The second firing process is called the gloss firing. It is fired at 1240 degrees Celsius, which is as high as metal melting temperatures. The cycle that we send the elephant item through is an 8-hour cycle in a kiln called the roller hearth kiln. Once it goes into the kiln, it comes out of the other end in roughly 8 hours, and it's now shiny, and the hand painting shows through, the glaze is clear. The final steps of the product is to attach the chains, the accessories, and also to package it to be ready for retail. The steps are done individually for every elephant and meticulously packed so that each elephant has its own plastic box and its own carry-on box. In the market these days, handmade products have a high demand because the customers want each individual item to be unique. So even if they order 500 pieces, all 500 pieces they would like to be different. So when we do a hand painting, and we also do most of the other processes like glazing and finishing by hand, each individual piece turns out to be unique on its own. This fetches a higher price in the market because of this uniqueness.